Resident Evil 1 Director's Cut. I'd have to go out and buy more games. These copies are in immaculate condition. I haven't played any of them. There are 14 Resident Evil games in my collection right now, and I haven't played any of them. It's not because I'm like some sort of collector only and I don't actually play my games, it's because I've been waiting on one. These are the pickup shelves for the game room, and they basically serve as a holding zone for games that haven't yet made it into the main game room space. These are the games I was waiting on. These Resident Evil games are great. They're awesome. They are games that any collector would be stoked to have in their collection. But these are the ones that I have been looking for a while. And they're not particularly hard games to find. It's just that they're the ones that I really wanted to play first, and they're in unbelievable condition. They are Resident Evil 1 Director's Cut, Resident Evil 2, and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And it's not that these games are particularly hard to find or even hard to find in really great condition, it's just that I managed to find them all in the exact same place. These actually all came from the same seller on Facebook Marketplace. They're from a guy that I've worked with before. Every once in a while I'll fix an old Game Boy for him or reshell a PlayStation, and that relationship has sort of paid dividends. And when I found his listing on Facebook Marketplace, he was willing to work with me a little bit and trade some DS and 3DS games to take about $50 off the total that he was asking for these ones. But wait, there's more. He then reached out to me with another image of more Resident Evil games, and I sort of picked through them based on whether or not they were complete and how much he wanted for them, but I ended up getting the PS2 copy of Resident Evil X Code Veronica, and these two Resident Evil Outbreak games, the first and file number 2, which I actually had never heard of. After all the haggling and negotiation was done, I traded him 3 DS and 3DS games and repaired a PlayStation 2 for him, and in exchange got this lovely stack of games for $230. So I waited all this time, 14 different Resident Evil games, and I've never played a single one because in my mind, it made the most sense to start with the first one. You know, obviously, if you're going to start a new series, you start at the beginning and you work your way forward. That just made sense to me, but recently we've been seeing a lot of games like Dead Space and Resident Evil getting remakes and graphical upgrades, and so a lot of people are ranting about how those should be the places that you'd start. If you've gone back and played GoldenEye for the N64, I mean, I know that game holds a special spot in my heart, but God, go back and play it now. I hate to admit it, it just doesn't hold up the way that I had it in my head. So is this really the right place to start? My original plan was pretty straightforward. I'd start with the first one and work my way through the first 3, but then I started reading this article from PushSquare.com. They've got a pretty convincing argument that talks about the best Resident Evil games for newcomers, and their order doesn't even have you playing any of the first 3 titles unless you consider Resident Evil 2 Remake on the PS4 one of the original series, but the game is completely different. Their argument completely surrounds the idea that the tank controls were absolutely garbage, and that fixed camera angle was just not doing anything for the original games, and so these newer versions of the game have switched to third or first person perspectives, and they think that's the best way to get you into this series if you've never played a game at all. And what's crazy, if I was to take Push Square's recommendations on the order of games played for newcomers, I'd have to go out and buy more games because I still don't own Resident Evil 2 Remake on the PS4. Then you've got other takes, like this really interesting one from Games Radar that talks about the order they think you should play the Resident Evil games in, and it's completely based on the Resident Evil timeline. So if you're trying to play the games in the order that the actual events happened in, they'd have you starting with Resident Evil 0, moving into Resident Evil Remake, and the third game they'd have you playing is just the first half of Resident Evil 3 Remake. Playing the games in the order that Games Radar would have me doing as far as the timeline is concerned wouldn't be too hard, but it would have me playing both of the first two games on the GameCube, which raises a completely different problem, and that's that a lot of these games were released on completely different platforms, and so I can play these versions of these games and have a different experience based on how well that hardware works. What all of this comes down to is one of the more important questions I've ever asked you, the audience, because the next game that I play is absolutely going to be a Resident Evil game, and I'm going to leave it up to you, the audience, to tell me what order I should play them in, because the first game that I play is going to be my next 3-day rental video game review. So please throw it down in the comments. Which Resident Evil game should I start with first when I start to tackle a new series for me in the game room? Thank you so much for sticking around till the end. I appreciate all the support. Likes, comments, subscribes, all that stuff goes a long way into helping my channel grow. Thanks so much, and I will catch you on the next one.